So, part of the reason that I requested that you be on the agenda is I recently encountered at an interdisciplinary committee a gentleman who we had put on probation who was applying for a job at our facility. And so I was brought in as a consultant as to what the process was. And I proceeded to put out our probationary document that the board issued. And the individual was accepted into Maximus. And so I said, well, these are the requirements of probation from what we put him on. Then the chief nursing officer proceeds to go, well, what about his can only work 8 hours and no 2 shifts? I'm going, what are you talking about? And she goes, this is a totally separate contract that you have nothing to do with. This is Maximus. I've been on this board for 22 years. I never knew this existed. It was outrageous. The kid couldn't get a job in the world. That's what I want to know about. Now, if that pertains to that, then I'm more than willing to watch it.
Well, it puts it into context, I think. You want to kind of go through the process. I can go through very quickly the issues about substance use disorder and spend more time talking about the program and the structure of the program. I understand that in your board packet, you have a sample contract with all possible terms. So understand that not everyone gets all of those terms. It's a selection process, but we can also go over that if you'd like.
Well, I guess one of my questions, I don't know, will have to defer to council. Should the board members who are putting this individual on probation and putting in that probation that they're recommended to participate in Maximus, should we be aware that these contracts exist?
Yeah, I mean, if it's part of the program for substance abusing licensees, then I believe that's the contract that we executed on, the department did on behalf of the boards in the Department of Consumer Affairs. I'm sure, that information is available publicly to know the procedure. Now, how the testing is done, how frequently and all that, that would be confidential information we don't want to discuss in a public venue.
Right, but I can address it through the uniform standards, which
Correct.
does set some standards
Yeah,
for
and those
testing.
uniform standards were adopted pursuant to legislation. The boards didn't really have a choice in that regard. They had to implement them. So
of the 66 practice restrictions, you guys pick and choose which ones pertain to a certain particular patient?
Yes, I don't have the document in front of me, so I'm going from memory, but there's an initial section that has standard contract terms that apply to everyone. And then following that, there's a section of all other possible terms, and we select. We can also add terms at the board's request.
So
Okay.
I'm just looking at the document under number 10, which says drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program participation costs and initial practice restrictions, which is under item 10 on our agenda. And it says that on the second page and the third paragraph down, after reviewing the results of the clinical diagnostic evaluation, the program and board staff will determine if the participant is safe to return to practice. If the participant is determined safe to return to practice, the program and board staff will then authorize a number of hours permitted to practice. And I think my personal issue here is that we are not, the board staff, to my knowledge, is not getting an opportunity to participate in these decisions. And we're not aware of the decisions that are made about how much practice a person in the program is allowed to do. That's my personal concern. Is that kind of what you were concerned about, Bob? Is that we don't, even though our instructions say we should participate in the process, this is all determined at Maximus and we have nothing to do with it.
I mean, my problem was the contract. I mean, I'm sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden I get handed this document that I've never seen with all these restrictions on the PA. Can't work any overtime, can't work nights, can't do this. And it's like, how's this guy going to get a job here? And I was not aware that any of this ever existed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody else on this board was.
Okay. Well, let me back up just for a minute and give you some background. We've had the contract since 2003 with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and we work with 8 licensing boards. So what you're seeing on the contract terms can apply to any or all of the licensing boards. And to answer your question, um, the board staff is the diversion program manager for the board. So that's who we consult with when we make those decisions. It's not Maximus in a vacuum. Some of those terms, the no overtime, the no night shift, the no remote workers, typically apply to nursing. They're available to any board, and most of the boards use those, but they really generated out of the nursing contract terms. The reason being that it's safer to bring somebody back into work gradually, limit their hours, because that's often what triggered these issues in the first place was overwork, night shift, changing their sleep cycle, that sort of thing. So it really is an attempt to bring people back into the work setting in a gradual process. And it's not required. You can select any work restrictions that your board chooses.
So we have the
This
opportunity.
guy, it was impossible for him to get a job.
How do we go about choosing those restrictions?
You work with your diversion program, with Lynn or with Anita, and we're happy to change any contract terms you want. We're a vendor at your disposal.
But we don't have to do it.
I think the issue is that we are just not aware of this, right? So is this something that for someone who is in the diversion program, that after they have the Maximus evaluation, we should be hearing something to say, okay, here is the recommended restrictions. Is the board okay with that?
I'm not,
The
I'm sorry.
the disciplinary orders are not set up like that. Usually it's delegated to program staff to manage the probation and the oversight of your probationers.
Okay.
So you would need to change your guidelines and the delegations, and you would need to have meetings to do these.
Right. So
So-
I'm not saying we need to do that. I'm just trying to understand how we have people on diversion with a whole bunch of restrictions that we know nothing about and how to prevent that moving forward in the future, or at least help us know to be aware of how many restrictions we've put on someone, so that we're aware of what we're doing.
My first reaction to that is I think it needs to be an individualized process. I think that everybody's story is a little bit different, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at the work restrictions. If they in fact diverted from the workplace and took medication from either an office setting or a facility setting, then those restrictions need to be considered in terms of what they have access to when they do return to work. And it's a gradual process to allow them to adjust as well as to allow us to make sure that we're protecting the public. So we can,
Well, I understand those kind of restrictions, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I
Mhm.
mean, if you got somebody who's stealing oxycodone and they got caught, they obviously need to, A, not have access, or B,
I think it's a gradual access. Initially,
but-
probably not.
It was basically the hour restriction, the no overtime. This individual was going to go to 2 of our facilities, had a monitor at both, had a supervising position at both,
Hmm.
but wasn't able to do it because it said he couldn't do that in the contract.
No, I'm not sure in this particular case, and I don't know this person, but we do allow people to work in 2 work settings with worksite monitors
Yeah,
at each.
after multiple appeals, it was changed, and they said,
Okay.
yes, he can. But
I don't know
he
this
came-
case, and I don't know why that would be.
He came this close to not getting a job, and he was extremely qualified,
Mhm.
and his alcohol abuse problem was more than 5 years old at the time that this came up.
Mhm.
So quickly, just so I understand, can we just go through the process? Once we make the recommendation to go through Maximus, then what happens? Does the contract go to you, or does it go to Anita, or who makes this recommendation or doesn't make this recommendation?
So there's a process. So they come in We do an assessment with the registered nurse who's one of our case managers. We also send them for a face-to-face assessment with a clinician in the community. So it's a two-level assessment. We are required by the uniform standards that we mentioned earlier to have at least 30 days of negative test results, which in reality takes about 45 days because they have to register with the lab and we have to get that last result back. So it's about a 45-day process before they're even cleared to return to work. The work, once we have somebody back in, they're reviewed, I believe it's twice a year with this particular board staff. The different boards handle it differently. And the case is reviewed in full at that point. But up until that point, our case manager is free to consult with the diversion program manager on any of the terms of the case.
Okay, so I guess I'm missing where the terms come in. Do we set the terms, or once they meet with your nurse and go through what the process is, they make the terms? They say, you can't work night shifts, you can work night shifts, or you can work a double shift.
It's pretty standard across the board that none of our participants work night shift. If that's something that this particular board wants to change, we'll remove that from the term. But that has been applied to everyone because that's across the board. All 8 boards operate that way.
Okay, because I guess when I'm looking at the 66 conditions, some say they're, I'm assuming that you opt certain ones because some of them are contradictory. You can't work 2 different shifts, and then this one says may work double shifts, and
Right.
and so do you just pick and choose?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and then who does the picking and choosing again? Is that the nurse? You, Anita.
So twice a year, I meet with our case manager, and
Is that
we
the
would-
nurse? Is that the nurse?
that-
She's
Okay.
a nurse case man. All of our case managers are nurses.
Okay.
Okay, so twice a year, I meet with the case manager, and before I meet with them, I get everybody who's in the diversion program, I get their files, and I
Okay.
have their files, and we
Okay.
review all the reports that they've turned in, their 12 steps, everything that they've been going through. There are reports for everything that they do.
Okay.
So we review each report and make an evaluation. This person is succeeding, they're doing this, they're doing that. Let's change it and give them the opportunity to work 2 shifts. Give them the opportunity
Okay.
to. So we gradually move them back into working.
Okay, so I
Well-
think I'm just understanding that they get the first set of guidelines from the nurse coordinator's first meeting.
Those are
Okay.
kind of set
Which
for
we
the very
don't
first
know
until
about.
until they get into,
Okay.
once they're in the program.
So how do we get a chance to make those recommendations with that nurse or before that happens?
the client, the participant puts in a request, and that request is reviewed, and the case manager will contact me and says, this participant has requested this for these reasons, do you approve it? And based on whether they've had any non-compliances or how well they've been doing or whatnot, I 9 times out of 10 will approve whatever the participant has requested. If they have a history of non-compliance, I'm hard pressed to approve them, giving them
Right.
more to do when
Right.
when they're not complying with the.
So
with
I
what
think
they
that's
had.
great. I think just as the board, we're missing that opportunity to have some input on what's happening after we make the decision to go to Maximus. And so I think that's where we have to disconnect. But thank you for that. I appreciate
We
it.
also take into consideration, I just want to add that, is that they're attending a health support group once or twice a week, depending on their individual needs. But we talk to the support group facilitator who sees them every week to let us know what their impression is of their progress in recovery and are they ready to return to work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just think there needs to be some way that the members are aware of what's going on. I mean, we've been totally blind to this. Should this be something, when you get the request, that goes to the members to decide? We're the ones that are responsible for them being in Maximus, but we have no clue what's going on after they're in it.
How often
Well,
does this
typically,
board
that's
meet?
an investigative function. It's not something that would be handled by the board members, but we can certainly consider options by placing this item you're discussing on a future agenda to just ferret out what options you might want to pursue. But right now, we're going to be discussing the program as it currently exists. So I'd suggest that maybe you put it on a future agenda if you want to discuss that more thoroughly. But I think one of the issues to consider is that any board members that participated in that part of it would need to be recused from future decisions on that person's case coming forward because you would be considered part of the investigative part of
So-
the case prosecution.
So Bob, is it that you want to participate, or is it just that we need to be briefed on what kind of restrictions these people have?
Well, I certainly want to know what the restrictions are, and I think it should be PAs making decisions on what gets changed. Members of the board, if we have to appoint a 2-member committee that reviews Maximus contracts, would
Yeah.
that be?
Well, I don't know, like, again, I think maybe place it on a future agenda so we
I'm
can
just
more
asking
thoroughly.
I'm just asking for an answer.
I don't know. I have to really think about it and think about what the options might be. And so I think it would be helpful if we put it on another agenda so I can do more thoughtful review of it and give you some suggestions for how to address your concerns.
I want to hear what the other members have to say. Dead silence.
Well, I guess my comment is, you've been on the board how many years?
22.
22, and you've never known that. So what is our, as board members, what is our responsibility? Does it carry down to that level? I guess that's my question.
Well,
What's our responsibility?
I mean, ultimately, I would think that a PA could say, hey, this is so restrictive that I can't find a job, and you're the guys that put me on probation. Well,
I'm not
probation-
disagreeing with, I'm just wondering, what's
No,
our
I mean,
responsibility?
We're the guys that put the individual on probation, but we didn't know we were doing all this to them.
We do have some responsibility for oversight, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, and I think that's what this falls under really is oversight of the program that we're using to carry out our discipline. So I think we do have a responsibility. I don't know that we need to be into the nitty gritty. I mean, we
Right.
are delegating some of this to Maximus because of their expertise in it, but there does need to be some oversight. And I think, if I understand correctly, what we're talking about here really is oversight of this, which we can put on the agenda for a future item for how we want to do that.
Right.
I don't think we necessarily need to do it today, but
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree with that.
I would make a motion to put that on a future agenda item.
I'd second.
Okay.
I don't even think we need. So Virginia, would you like to give us some of your PowerPoint, or
Sure. The
fired all our cannons at you?
I understand, and I do understand it is very restrictive. I will tell you that we have a very, very low relapse rate, and some of that is because of the restrictions of the program. It's a gradual return to full functioning, and I think that's the reason that we have a relapse rate of 13% over a 5-year period. The general public, not in a program like this, is somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. So we know that it's the effectiveness of that monitoring and the support that the case managers are able to give that keeps individuals active in their recovery. And that's really what it's about, because we're here for protection of the public. So skipping through all of the early parts where the presentation, you're free to review it, talks about the opiate crisis, what's happening now in our country, why are we in this situation. But if you want to talk specifically about the program, as I mentioned, we have 8 licensing boards that we work with, all under a single umbrella contract with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And then I would mention that none of the other boards have ever asked to be involved at that level of reviewing individual contracts. And I would encourage you to think that if you're meeting quarterly, there would be a long period of time for people to go before any changes could occur. There's a model that some of the boards use that this board chooses not to use also something that you might want to put on the agenda to consider in the future. For example, nursing, they use a intervention evaluation committee. Osteopathic board uses a diversion evaluation committee. What that is 3 members of the profession, a public member, and a physician. And they meet the participants individually in a committee setting and interview them and evaluate their case in a face-to-face setting, and that's where the decisions are made, rather than with the case manager, with a single member of the board. Something to think about. It is in your enabling statutes, and something that if you wanted to do, would be already written into the statute.
Is that a deck?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a very effective model, and there isn't any other state that I'm aware of in the country that uses a model like that. There are 44 other states with programs similar. None of them use the DEC committee model, but it's very effective because you have individuals at the table who have experience working in recovery or are in recovery themselves, and they're able to evaluate the individuals. So I can't see the slide number, so I'm not sure where I am, but it's in initial program steps, and I'm just going to talk about the process of the program. So I mentioned we do that intake assessment by phone, we do a clinical assessment in person. We recommend entry into treatment depending on their individual case, and all of their situation is taken into consideration, including most recent use, what their drug of choice is, whether they've diverted from the workplace, how long they've been using. All of that's taken into consideration and they're referred into treatment. I would imagine that, I don't have a statistic, but I would say probably 80 to 90% of our individuals are referred into treatment to start, usually in an outpatient setting. They are required to contact our case manager weekly until they're reviewed by the committee. So we have a weekly contact to evaluate their status, their progress in recovery, whether they're compliant with the program terms. We refer them into 12-step meetings, whether it's AA, NA, a combination of the two, Pills Anonymous, whatever it might be. At times, we recommend Codependence Anonymous because they have other issues going on in their lives that need them to look at, their relationships and how that plays into their substance use. And we require daily meetings to start. That's pretty standard. The 12-step community encourages 90 meetings in 90 days, which is daily meetings for 90 days. Really a way to get into the 12-step philosophy and to understand it and really step away from all of the influences that were occurring with the substance use. We have them go to health support group once or twice a week. Those are run by licensed clinicians, either MFTs, PhDs, LCSWs. Out in the community, we have a network of clinicians that manage the health support groups. We do random testing. I mentioned the uniform standards. The uniform standards require weekly testing to start. It's 52 times a year, up to 104. There aren't too many that happen at 104 times a year, but at a minimum, 52 times a year for the first year. We have a very extensive test panel. It's established in our contract with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it is even at a lower price than many other states are for a lower level panel, and it's because of volume. They're able to meet that price requirement. So it's in your sheet, but it's $62.50 per test, plus the cost of collection. Combined, that's about $100 a test. Now you're talking about weekly to start. So that's the uniform standard requirement. We do have the option to do other types of testing. We can do blood test for alcohol use that has a 3-week window called a PEth test. We also do hair and nail testing. It has about a 3-month window of detection, roughly. So that gives us other options for testing that don't rely on urine testing and a shorter window of detection. Participant must apply to return to work, as Anita described, and they're considered their compliance with the requirements, their drug test results, their recommendation of their support group facilitator. And once they're returned, once they're approved, they can return to clinical practice. So those restrictions on work, again, that's up to you if you want to remove that no overtime restriction from the requirement. That's fine, we can do that. Important to consider the individual case and whether overtime was an issue for them when they were using their substance, using their drug of choice. When they are offered a job, we need a work site monitor in the workplace. Again, I mentioned we have many participants who have more than one work site and more than one work site monitor. I don't know that individual case and what happened there, but I can certainly look into why that was, why anybody was told that that wasn't possible, because it certainly is. Participant has to give us, there are 8 different documents that are required to get somebody to return to work. The reason being, uniform standards require that their worksite monitor be in a supervisory position. We need to see an organizational chart to know that they actually are. We need an agreement that the worksite monitor signs to accept the duties of the position. We need a release of information. We need the contact information. We have to provide training to the worksite monitor, what to look for, what a relapse looks like, what is signs of diversion or impairment in the workplace. We ask for a job description so we know that that's within the work restrictions. For example, if initially to start they're not to have access to controlled substances, then we need to see that that's in the job description. And that the worksite monitor then has to submit an affidavit that they meet the criteria, they've been trained, and they agree to the expectations. And then also to know that there's a year of transition before they complete the program. They're on a reduced level of monitoring. They're not required to attend 12-step meetings anymore. They're not required to attend support group meetings. We encourage them to, but we don't ask for documented proof. They're beginning to take responsibility for their own recovery, and they petition for transition. And that also is a very powerful process because they write an essay, they look at their lives, they look at all aspects of their lives, biopsychosocial, financial, all of the pieces of it, and look at what brought them into this program, what was happening in their lives before, sometimes all the way back to childhood, and where they are today, what their recovery looks like today and going forward. And we ask for letters of reference from their sponsor, from their family members, from their employer and support group facilitator. And then successful completion is a manner of living that supports ongoing recovery. So to get to the point of successful completion, it's 2 years of positive compliance and negative drug tests and demonstration of safe practice with the reports from the worksite monitor. So, and then that year of transition. So minimum time to complete the program at this point is 3 years, 2 years of good compliance plus a year of transition. That was it in a nutshell. Let's see.
Question
Oh.
about your level of nursing. Is it with an RN practitioner, nurse practitioner, LVN that does the visit, the coordinating?
I'm sorry, don't understand your question. For the Board of Nursing's program?
No. So when we contract with Maximus, you mentioned that they meet with the nurse to go through their, I guess, their plan.
The case manager?
The case manager. So what's their level?
They're all RNs.
RNs.
They're all experienced working in substance use disorders.
Okay, great. Thanks.
We currently have 5 nurses and myself. I also, up on the screen, I have the cost of treatment. That's something that is out of our control as well, but this is just for an example. This is Hazelden Betty Ford's. They're one of the best in the country. They have a professionals program for healthcare professionals. So these are their costs of treatment, $912 a day. It adds up very quickly. Day treatment programs are about half that. Intensive outpatient is $244 a day. And the cost of naltrexone and Vivitrol are there. Suboxone, which is medication-assisted treatment, you may be hearing about that. It's in the news a lot. All of our boards have elected at this point to not permit it when someone's in the program. Again, if that's something that this board wants to consider at a later date, it's worth discussion. But the issue is really that there are some studies that indicate that there's potential for cognitive impairment. So the boards have not wanted to allow participants to use Suboxone if they're returning to work. It's not denying that it's an effective treatment for opiate use disorder, but it's not permitted in our program, and we are an abstinence-based program. Let's see. And then you have in your board packet, you have the rest of the program costs. Do you have any questions about those? Oh, and I do want to mention the physician assistants in the program about 2012, I think, although I might be off on the year, there was some legislation that passed that requires the physician assistants to pay the full program fee unless they were in the program at the time that changed. They were not required to pay the fee. I don't think we have anybody left now in the program. So individuals coming into the program are required to pay the full program fee. It's $369 a month. If they're self-referred, it's $277 a month. We currently have 2 participants self-referred at that $277 monthly fee and 12 that are paying the full program fee. We have a total of 14 enrolled in the program right now.
Now, the $269 a month, though, doesn't include the biologic.
Correct. That's an administrative fee to the program.
Are there any accreditation standards or a body that certifies diversion programs?
There are not, but we are ISO certified. We've chosen to do that. We wrote that into the contract in the 2010 contract renewal. So we have been ISO certified since 2011. It's an international standards organization that reviews for quality and adherence to the contract and to the terms.
Thank you.
And we've been audited. We were audited by an external entity. I think it's been 2 years, almost 3 years now. That was their name is CPS is the name of the agency. But we were audited and did very well in the audit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, does anybody have any more questions? More questions? Public comment?
Did you want to take the vote on the motion?
We need to take a vote.
There was a motion to calendar for a future
Yeah.
board meeting. The
I
issue,
was just gonna put it down as future board.
well, there was a motion made and seconded, so you usually have to act on it when it's
So we have a
made.
motion to further discuss Maximus at a future board meeting. So let me call the roll. Any further discussion on that? Public comment? All right. Dr. Alexander,
Aye.
Jennifer Carquist,
Aye.
Sonia Early,
Aye.
Xavier Escobar Acosta,
Aye.
Jed Grant, Xavier. Why am I pronouncing your name wrong today?
No, you're pronouncing his name wrong. His is Javier, mine's Xavier.
Xavier Martinez.
Aye.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia, aye. All right, it carries.
Let's go to Martinez.
Thank you, Virginia.
I look forward to coming back. Thanks.
I apologize for the blast, but
It's okay.
it's been something that
I
we've been
understand.
discussing. At this time, we're
Lunch.
kind of ahead of schedule a little bit. Why don't we take a 20-minute lunch break?
Yep, that's fine with me.
Okay, council wants 30.
Thank you. So we'll come back at 1.
We will come back at 1.
Thank you.
So we're call the meeting back to order. In the interest of time, we have 3 reports that we did not cover: licensing, diversion, and enforcement. The information is in your packets under section C, rather than going through the reports, if anybody has any questions on them, I'd prefer to save some time. If you are in agreement.
I just had a question on the licensing report. I think there's been a spike. If Anita, if you could just address the increased numbers you've been seeing.
Are you talking about the, which number, sir?
You said there was an increase in the percentage of new
Yes.
licenses?
I'm sorry. New licenses issued between 2016 and 2017, we've shown a 15% increase
Awesome.
between the 2 years, and we're expecting that to continue at that rate based on what we discussed at our last board meeting and the additional programs that are coming into effect. So for 2017, we issued 1,143 initial licenses.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on either licensing, diversion, or enforcement? Public comment on any of those items? Okay, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is going to be agenda item, where to go? Number 8. Discussion regarding nationwide trends on optimal team practice. And it has me listed, but I have deferred my report to Gabe Raymond. I warned you in advance.
About an hour ago, he said, "Hey, Gabe." Thank you. Thank you very much. Gabe Raymond with California Academy of PAs. In your last board packet, you had a 2-page infographic about OTP. Really, nothing has changed. That is a national movement. That is something that they've put out. We are going to be holding stakeholder meetings over the next several months with physicians and medical groups and anyone, including this organization, will be meeting with you as well to just see your feelings about OTP, what you believe OTP is and what OTP isn't. One thing it is not is independent practice. We just were talking about that. There's a lot of misunderstanding that what PAs are seeking is independent practice, and that is absolutely not true. If PAs wanted independent practice, they would have gone to medical school. They are looking to work in teams with physicians. So there's 4 points to OTP, which is what, like I said, you were handed that last time. We would like to emphasize PA's commitment to team practice with the degree of collaboration determined at the practice level. So depending on the PA and the practice, that would determine the amount of collaboration, what that collaboration looks like. We want to eliminate the legal requirement for PAs to have a specific relationship with a specific physician. It could be a team of physicians, it could be in a group. We want to authorize PAs to be directly reimbursed by all private and public payers, and an autonomous majority PA board to regulate PAs. So PAs should be regulating PAs, which you guys do quite nicely and quite well. So that's it. By August, when you meet with us, you're going to meet at our August meeting in San Diego. We're going to have a lot more information at that point, and we'll be able to share a lot more of what that's going to look like for PAs in California. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question before you leave? Did it speak to delegation of services, or is that just in a team approach as well, or
Does OTP,
speak to delegation of services, or?
it does, it will. What that looks like right now, Bob had mentioned at one of the meetings, he's got a 33-page DSA. Some people have a 2-page DSA. That level, that needs to be looked at and to be uniform and to be simple and delegate to the PA something very simple and direct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we will go to solid. Item number, wherever it is. 14, thank you.
Good morning, afternoon. So I'm Elizabeth from Solid DCA. I am here for strategic planning. I'll be assisting the board with the strategic planning process. I'm here to give you an overview what strategic planning is. In front of you. I'll wait a couple seconds. You'll have a development roadmap that looks like this. And basically, there's 5 main components to strategic planning. The first main component is getting to know our client, introducing ourselves, setting the schedule, deciding the roles and the process. Boards and bureaus are a little bit unique, and so we customize the planning process for each board and bureau. The next big step is the actual environmental scan. This is where we'll be conducting the surveys, the interviews, the focus groups, whatever is decided by the client, and we'll be requesting feedback in regards to the board's internal strengths and weaknesses, which are the processes and the external threats and opportunities and threats with a SWOT analysis. And we'll be requesting this feedback from the internal staff, from the board members, and from the stakeholders through listservs or whatever is available to the board. And we'll take this information, we will compile it, categorize it, and pretty much come up with a summary for you all to view. And raw comments available if you request so. After that, we will have that environmental scan, which is pretty much, sorry, coming in and out of there. The report is pretty much what you will be used during the planning session where you'll be developing the objectives for the upcoming years. You can also have a choice of redetermining your mission, vision, and values and redefining the goal areas and the statements. So after that, we'll facilitate the planning session. Again, it depends on the availability. We can do a full day or a couple half days, whatever is determined. After that facilitation has been complete, we will take all the objectives provided basically in a report format, and we'll go back and forth until that is finalized and adopted in the next board meeting. And after that, we do provide action planning where we help the board and staff put those objectives into action through establishing tasks, timeframes, success measures. And that is all the services that we do provide. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
From our last strategic plan, did we meet all of the objectives? Did we meet what we set out to do in terms of action planning? Or?
I am not sure at the moment. That is something to discuss with the client, with the EO, whether you want to roll on some of those objectives.
Okay. And then can we do some of this offline as opposed to doing a full day? Because, we are only here so often.
And we can discuss that, yes. I passed out a worksheet that will be disseminated to the board president, correct? Yes, and that will all be decided in the worksheet if that's okay, or did you want to discuss it out here?
Okay, well, I think last year, whoever the individual who came here was talking about 2 days, and we basically identified that we could do 1 4-hour period and 1 2-hour period. And we were able to produce, I think, a really great document. And we're not interested in recreating the wheel again.
Okay.
We'll change our objectives and those types of things, obviously.
Okay.
But spending hours and hours and hours, we don't have the time.
Okay,
It's just that simple.
definitely. Did you want to discuss that here, or did you just want to send an email over the phone?
I think, yeah, I will let the executive officer, but I would like to get some input from the board members.
Definitely. Definitely.
Everybody's looking at me, so I'm going to talk.
You turned your microphone on.
Well, I was actually trying to turn it off, but anyway, I just thought, I thought the last year's process was good, but sort of dragged on a little bit. So I think keeping it concise would be good and not reinventing the wheel. I think some of those, the mission of the board doesn't really change.
Okay.
There
So
are
you would
some-
like to keep the mission, vision, and values the same, the goal areas and the goal area statement the same, just revising or updating the objectives themselves.
Yeah.
I think that sounds right.
Yes? Okay.
And we can also take a look at the plan to see if we met our goals and objectives, and if not, carry those over, and then also set new ones.
Definitely you can, whoever I'll be coordinating with EO. If there's objectives that have been completed or ones that you want to roll over, definitely let her know and we can set a time based on that. So I don't know how many will be rolled over. So based on how many will be rolled over and how many you may be developing, then we can kind of have a better understanding of the time that we'll be needing for the strategic planning session.
Great, thank you.
And what are we anticipating our April meeting?
We've got reg hearings already, we've got at least one petition, hearing, and that's just what I know of right now
So 3 hours, maybe?
for what we've already got scheduled.
Maybe do 2 hours just to kind of get a feel for what you might want to update, and then another meeting to go more substantively into the areas that you need to update.
Our next meeting, finances permitting, will be in April.
Okay.
And maybe we could start the flow with 2 hours. Would that be a sufficient amount of time for looking at goals and objectives, or an overview in goals and objectives?
I would have to discuss that later, but I would say maybe 4 to 6 hours to do the planning session, updating it and developing the objectives.
4 to 6 hours total.
About,
How much of that can we do by email and?
Yes.
No.
I don't, based on the rules of board meeting, I'm not quite sure how that
No,
would.
I mean, unfortunately, there's no exception for strategic planning in the Open Meeting Act. So you'd have to actually do a teleconference or in-person meeting to do this strategic planning. And so I guess what we're trying to find out is if there a way to break it up into 2-hour segments so that you're not taking 4 to 6 hours of a day where they need to get other board work accomplished. Is that possible?
I can discuss that with managers.
Okay.
That'd be great.
I'll discuss that with my manager and the worksheet that I provided, EO, if that can be shared with, is it the board president? And so I can get more of that logistics down as well.
One person's fine, but more than one would be.
More than one would be problematic for the Open Meeting Act purposes.
Definitely. Any other questions?
So I mean, the first, looking at our current one, really the first 6, 7, 8 pages are all essentially going to be the same. They're not going to change. Our vision, I think our mission is still the same. Our values are the same. Workforce would be something that we should look at.
And that as well, we have the full strategic planning, which is the environmental scan, or we have more of that update, which we do that a little bit different as well. If you want to take a look at the document, the strategic plan, and just send me an email or send Lynn an email to me, forward it to me of how many have been completed, just to get an idea. If we're looking to pretty much update or refine the strategic planning, or again, developing new objectives, because that would definitely determine how much time we'll be working with.
Okay. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
So I'll leave it to you and the executive officer to figure out an allocation of time for the April meeting.
Definitely. And if you can provide her with, again, the strategic plan, how much has been completed, or I guess that could be something that's done by the board and the staff. But again, that worksheet with some of those questions.
Yeah, we can't unfortunately do any action on the plan without the board being
I
together at a
understand.
meeting like this one. So this is why I was asking whether you could take an idea back to your management and see if you could break it up into 2 to 3 hour segments.
Definitely. I will
Because
ask
this
that.
board only meets, one day at a time. They don't have multiple day meetings. And
I
so
understand.
they have other work that needs to get done. So that's kind of what we need you to go back and see if you could do. And if there's a way to accommodate, like, for instance, like 2 hours on the goals or 2 hours on the objectives, or do we have to do a full environmental scan all at the same time?
The environmental scan is done separately, so I'll be doing that prior to the planning session.
Okay,
That's
great.
where the report will be developed and provided to you all.
Okay.
I hear that mission, vision, and values, goal areas and goal area statement, like the descriptions, those aren't going to change. So we're just looking at objectives. And I want to make sure we provide the best services that we could provide. So in making sure that breaking it down to a block of 2 hours won't impact the quality of service that we provide. So I want to make sure before agreeing to a 2 hour block.
Okay. Anything else, board members?
No questions?
We just changed the date of our February 24th, 2014 strategic plan. I know. You want to hit me now?
But I think, I don't know. I mean,
No,
I'm not,
we need to have different objectives than what are in here because we've met most of them. I was just trying to get a rise out of you and I didn't.
I'm trying to be good, not react.
Okay, so everybody has a strategic planning questionnaire though.
Mhm.
So we could go ahead and fill this out and send it to the
No,
executive.
I don't think we have it.
Don't have it yet.
Oh,
So
how come I have it?
Because
Or
you're the board
president?
Oh,
Oh.
okay,
I will make sure it gets to the board members,
okay.
okay?
That will help me customize the process for your board, having those questions answered. And again, a better understanding of the time that will be needed.
Okay, all right. So we can accomplish that at least.
Definitely. So we can keep in touch, communication to see if we can arrange the time, and definitely all of you together, the board members, developing objectives. But the logistics, I could just through EO and board president.
Yes.
And then, would stakeholders get this also? No. Okay, so
What-
stakeholders can send us a note.
For
Well, I
what
mean,
particular item?
what would happen is if it gets placed on the agenda, then there would be an opportunity for the public to give input and comment on the strategic plan proposals at that time.
Okay,
But it's your plan, so.
okay. All right, anything else?
Thank
Have
you.
anything else for us?
No, no other questions.
Okay,
I'll keep in touch with board president and EO.
very good.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay. Moving along. Do you want to do your,
There's the regulations update. Do you want to do that
Okay.
first, or do you want me to do the training first?
maybe you should do this first and then we know what we were voting on there.
Okay.
Are we going up front again?
No, there's no PowerPoint for this one.
Okay, so next item is going to be some more training by our council on legislative proposal. Nope, that's not it. Overview of the regulatory process.
Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing the Department of Consumer Affairs rulemaking process and hopefully shed a little bit of light on why the regulations process takes as long as it does. With respect to regulations, every rule, order, or standard of general application by any state agency that implements, interprets, or makes specific a law under its jurisdiction is a rule that needs to be adopted in compliance with California's rulemaking law. And here we have a copy for you. We're not going to go through all of this today, but unless you have an exemption from the California Administrative Procedure Act, you have to follow the standards and guidelines set forth in those statutes and regulations in order to have your regulations approved by the agency called the Office of Administrative Law. They're the ones that are empowered by the state to review and approve and disapprove all regulations packages. But there, as you will see as we go along, there's a variety of different what I call control agencies that have authority to sort of prevent your rulemakings from continuing if you don't meet certain standards and receive their approval as well. So in your rulemaking package, I have provided you with the 6 standards that regulations have to meet in order to be approved by the Office of Administrative Law. It's also the standards that the control agencies and staff and attorneys in your department and at agency, Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, look at when they're determining whether a regulation is a valid regulation in compliance with the Administrative Procedure Act. So the first standard is authority, and that's you have to demonstrate in your rulemaking package that you have authority to adopt regulations. That's usually a pretty easy standard to meet. It's pretty clear if you have authority or don't. Typically your practice acts, and yours does, indicates you have the authority to adopt rules. The second standard is reference, and so you make clear in your regulations package which statute or regulation you're clarifying. So what we're talking about when we deal with rules is the situation where a statute is capable of more than one interpretation. So if it's more than one interpretation, if someone reads it and another person reads it and each person has a different opinion as to what it means, that usually is a signal that we need to adopt a rule to clarify what that statute means. So if the statute says something like, the board has the authority to set a fee for an application. Well, what is that fee? Is it 25, 50, 75? What is it? So that's a signal that we need a rule, and reference is that statute that we're clarifying. Consistency, the regulation has to be in harmony with and not in conflict with other existing statutes or other provisions of law. This comes up when there may be a corresponding federal law. You got to make sure that it doesn't conflict with federal law, or even within your own statutory and regulatory structure. Sometimes when people are drafting regulations, they don't really understand how their whole law works and how it speaks to itself across the different provisions of law, and so they don't understand whether they already have a law that governs that or whether it's already been clarified. So that's when consistency issues come up. Clarity is the next standard, and it means that the regulations are easily understood by those persons directly affected by them. This standard usually comes up most frequently with the text. So if you get a regulation and you have no idea what it means, that's a good sign that it's going to fail the clarity standard and it needs to be revised. And this can include and has included spelling, typographical errors, periods in the wrong place, commas in the wrong place. So you have to be real vigilant about making sure your text is properly and clearly drafted. Non-duplication is making sure that it really fulfills a purpose, that it doesn't serve the same purpose as the state, federal, or other regulations. So if there's already a statute that says something and you're just repeating it in regulation, that violates the non-duplication standard and also leads you into the next standard, which is necessity. So necessity is the number one reason a regulations package doesn't succeed in my years of working with the department. And basically what you have to show in every single document along the way is that you need it for a specific purpose. And if that purpose is not very readily apparent, your entire package will get rejected, and it can happen at various different stages of the rulemaking process. So the next item in your packet I have are the roles that our board has assigned to various people in your agency. And so the board obviously has its various roles, and it's more of the policy side of things. And then your attorney, myself, will be assisting with carrying forth whatever policy objective that you have actually directed to be implemented. And you'll see here from the chart that your staff really carries the brunt of the workload involved in preparing this regulations package and getting it through the process. It's extremely technical, difficult work. I think it's the most difficult work that we do in the department is drafting regulations and getting a regulations package successfully through the process. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but the next item in your packet is a chart. I've also given you a couple handouts, which I hope you've been able to locate. One is this long 14-inch, 8.5 long piece of paper, and the other is a packet that contains a completed rulemaking package. So this is a relatively simple example of what a simple, and I stress the word simple, regulatory change requires your staff to do to get it through the process. So I wanted to go through it with you so you get an idea of how many moving parts there are and how many opportunities there are for failure, because it's very, very technical, like I said, and mistakes can be made and things have to be redone, which can add to the length of time it takes to review. So this chart that I've given you was the process for filing rules with the department in 2015. In 2016, the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency added an additional layer of review to that process. So in your booklet, you have the initial phase of the rulemaking process. So if you take that and you put that on top of the chart, you will get an idea of how much longer our process is beginning at the end of 2016 to get a rulemaking package approved through departmental processes. And this is intended to assist with making your your packages more legally defensible, and also kind of along the lines of the recent North Carolina versus Board of Dental Examiners versus Federal Trade Commission case. To address some of the concerns board members have had about antitrust issues, regulations is one of those areas that is the highest area of liability. So to make sure that these issues are thoroughly examined before it's placed through the process has been considerably lengthened. So if we go to the initial phase of the chart, you'll see in item 1 that the first step is that someone recognizes, whether it's the public, the board members, or a staff person, that there's an issue that needs to be clarified, that there's a law that's not self-executing, it needs to be further interpreted, and that issue is brought to the board after legal review. So if you look at in your packet of the example of the package that was given to you, the text, well, it would be behind tab 1, and you're going to look at the last page in that tab before tab 2. So here's the text that was used to start the process that was brought to you at a board meeting. And that text is first sent to me in our office for review to make sure that it meets the 6 standards. So again, the number one problem with text is clarity. The sentences can be complicated, and if it's unclear to you when it comes before you, please say something. The 2 things that staff should be telling you when they bring a regulatory proposal before you are, what it's supposed to do and why it needs to be done. And every single change should be explained to you before there's a vote. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is so that you understand what law because it really has the force and effect of law, what you're doing. So you're understanding what conditions are being imposed or not imposed, depending on what you're doing, and also why you need it, whether you need it, because those are considerations in determining whether to send forth a rule for through the rulemaking process. So anyway, so that is brought to you after legal review for the 6 standards we talked about, to make sure that it's necessary, to make sure, from my perspective, I understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and whether you have the authority to do it. We're not perfect in our office, though, and certainly people that are farther away from it will have a better idea of whether there's a problem. If you read it and you don't understand it, please tell us, because that means other people will have the same problem. Once you have said, yes, this is a great idea, and you adopt a motion to initiate the rulemaking process, then your staff will go to the beginning. If you look at, after the blue sheet at the front part of your packet, the table of contents there, if you go 3 pages into the table of contents, you'll see that. Those are all the things that need to be prepared for a rulemaking package. So you'll see all the various different documents that have to be filed. Your staff, at the beginning in box 2, what we're going to be doing, if you go to tab 1, the first document that they're going to prepare is a notice. And when it comes to notices, the point of the notice of proposed rulemaking is to let the public know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and when they have an opportunity to provide public comment. So things we look for in notices are the public hearing is not correctly noticed. There's not 45 days of public comment period, because the public has to have 45 full days to comment on any proposal. That the written comment period closes too soon. Those are issues that come up. The authority and reference sections are not the same as what's listed in the text. All these documents repeat each other in various places, so they have to say the same thing throughout the documents. If they don't, the package will be rejected. The informative digest, a common problem there is that there's not a good explanation of why you're doing something. I mean, people have to be able to read it and have a common understanding of what you're talking about, a simple explanation. Things like, we're updating our regulations, or we need to do a retired status application. Okay, well, why? What necessitated this change? And what's your authority for doing it? And why are you doing it? I mean, people think, oh, why should I have to explain that? Well, the control agencies think you do. So you have to write a nice little term paper, and the shorter the better, but sometimes it's very difficult to summarize something in a few sentences, but it's got to all be there. In this case, your staff did a great job of explaining the history, the background, what's happening and why it's happening. Because remember, this is what the public sees, and they need to know right up front what you're doing in order to figure out whether they want to comment or not. Then there's all these different categories in this notice. Every single thing in here is required by the Office of Administrative Law to be analyzed and addressed. The second big issue that I have with notices is the business impact. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, every single regulation has to be analyzed for the business impact on your regulated community and your regulated population, whether there's a fiscal or economic impact, whether there's an impact to the industry and whether there's a fiscal impact to the state as a result of what you've done. And so the most frequent problem I have is in the business impact. It says there's no fiscal or economic impact because we're simply updating our regulations. Well, everything's an update. Everything's updated. So that's not going to pass budgets and Department of Finance review. The other problem that I see is people saying there's no business impact because we're just adopting a retired status application. Well, that's circular because we can see that you're doing a retired status application from the Informative Digest, but what is the impact to the actual population? So you'll see in this example on page 3 of the notice that your staff did a great job of explaining that there's not going to be a significant statewide adverse economic impact affecting any business because the proposed amendment would clarify and specifically permit the physician assistant to use computer software programs to automatically enter the information, thus saving costs and time and eliminating duplicative functions within the healthcare delivery system. This proposal would therefore result in cost savings for any businesses that employ physician assistants or no costs for those businesses already electronically generating the information required by this regulation. So you see how there's an analysis. There's a thorough explanation of why there's no impact. We used to, back in the good old days, I should maybe not call it that, but we used to just say, we've reviewed the matter and there's no fiscal or economic impact. And that used to be sufficient, but no longer sufficient. And you really have to do an analytical work to explain your conclusion. And many times the budget office and the Department of Finance will require hard number data. Staff will have to pull the number of applications they processed, and if there's going to be a decrease, show that the decrease will occur and there will be no negative offset or cost to the state as a result of it. Those types of analyses are frequent now. They didn't used to be, but this is what is being required to get a regulation package through. So that's just the notice in the text. Then the next item is the initial statement of reasons. That would be behind tab 2. The initial statement of reasons is what I like to call the term paper for the regulation. Every single regulatory text change that is made in your package has to be explained. If you don't explain every change, it's an automatic rejection by the director, agency, or Office of Administrative Law if they don't catch it. So it's very important that everything is explained. And if they can't figure out in the first few paragraphs what you're doing, it usually fails. There shouldn't be, if they spend very little time trying to figure out what you're talking about. If they can't understand it, it fails for clarity, it fails for necessity, and that will get your package rejected. My understanding is they will get these packages sometimes at the Office of Administrative Law, and they'll go straight to the initial statement of reasons, because if there is not an explanation for every single change, the whole thing gets thrown out. So it's very high stakes. You have to make sure that you kind of have a checklist and you go through and you explain every single thing in that package and explain why you're making that change. In this case, there weren't too many changes, so your staff did a great job of explaining the need to make these amendments so that you could have people automatically enter information about supervision without having to manually enter it. And that was pretty nicely explained if you look at pages 2 and 3 of the initial statement of reasons. The staff did a great job. The next thing that typically is a problem again is the business impact and economic impact assessment. The Office of Administrative Law a few years ago obtained authority to review the economic impact assessment on the initial statement of reasons. So again, they will look to see if you explained your conclusions about cost to the state or cost to the businesses that are being regulated. These explanations must be the same explanation that you provided in the notice. If they're not, again, your entire package will be rejected. So again, this is very technical. You have to be very thorough, consistent in your approach, because those standards require consistency, necessity, and clarity. And those tend to be the problems with the initial statement of reasons that I see when I'm reviewing these packages. The last item in the initial regulation package would be the 399, and that's at tab 10. So your staff has to prepare in accordance with the Department of Finance regulation, and I've included a copy in your packet of the regulation requirement for the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency and the director to sign your 399. And so the director, agency, budgets, finance, and Office of Administrative Law all look at this document. And one of the things they're looking for is whether you thoroughly explained and answered every single question. Typically, your staff has to attach a supplemental explanation because there's just not enough room on the form. So you'll see at the back the analysis that your staff did. And again, you're explaining your logic. If you don't explain your logic and it's circular and it's just a restatement of what the regulation says, the package will not be successful. And so the two biggest problems with packages that I see to date are the 399 and the initial statement of reasons. Text follows a little bit, but most of the time we resolve the text issues at the board level. It's when we're drafting these pieces to substantiate and support your policy objective that, I mean, every single paragraph and sentence is scrutinized. So that is only box 3, what I just talked to you about, that review. That's what I do at box 3. Okay, so it's a lot of work for the legal office to go through every single document I just talked to you about, to review everything, to talk to staff, to figure out whether they've explained something thoroughly enough or whether there should be more data collected. So that can take some time to get out of our office because we, of course, don't want your package to slow down. And so we're going to take a hard look at it at levels 2 and 3. After it gets legal approval, then we're at item 4. And your staff will make 4 copies and send it to the department's regulations coordinator in the Division of Legislative and Regulatory Review. That person kind of job is to shepherd the package through the various divisions in the department for review. So then the packages are sent to legal again, and at this time it will go to management. So it won't go to me, it'll go to managers in the DCA legal office to re-review the work again. And it'll go back to the Division of Legislative Regulatory Review, that's LRR, and then a copy will go to budgets. And so they are all reviewing this completed package that I just told you about, the text, the notice, the ISR, the 399, all simultaneously. So there can be changes and that go back and forth between the approving people and suggested amendments. So after that's done, and let's just say, it looks great from everyone else's perspective, but I'll tell you that I have never seen budgets not make a change to a 399 in all the years that I've been here. So typically, it ends up going to budgets and then it comes back to legal to double check the work and then go back out again. So there's a bit of a log jam there that can happen. But let's just say it makes it out of budgets, woohoo. Then it goes to our chief counsel who reviews everything all over again. Before it goes back to the Division of Legislative and Regulatory Review for the director's review and approval. Now, according to Business and Professions Code 313.1, the director has the authority to approve all rulemakings except those relating to exams and qualifications for licensure. So the director has to approve your package or it doesn't get filed. So there's a bit of a difference with other states than ours. There's definitely approval and law that have to be met before it can be filed. So then let's just say the director thinks it looks good, then it will go to our next level control agency, which is the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. So the governor has these cabinet level officers that oversee departments within the state. And our department is overseen by the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and the Department of Finance regulations require the agency secretary to sign the 399. This is what I call the pocket veto. So if anything from agency's perspective is not acceptable, it can be conceivably not approved. And if they don't sign the 399, even if you go and do everything else right and file it with the Office of Administrative Law, it will be rejected. because the 399 hasn't been signed by the agency secretary. So that's why we work with agency to try to address any concerns they might have with anything from fiscal to the language, the impact that's going to have on the licensing population to North Carolina issues. So a variety of things can come up at that stage.
Excuse me,
So,
Christy, and
yes.
usually at that stage, you're about, what, 6 months in, or?
You know, I don't know, Anita, would you say that's where we are, or is it longer? Because it's changed from 2015. 2015, it used to be 2 to 3 months, but now. 6 to 8 months. Yeah. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that we have a whole new group of people. We're kind of in a training mode right now. I've been at the office the longest, and I've only been there 18 years. So you see what I'm saying? There's only 18 years, but feels like forever. But so we do have those issues too, where people are learning what they need to issue spot for, and learning your practice acts and learning how they work, and that may be contributing to the delays that we are seeing right now.
So if I'm looking correctly, that's this
We're in
packet took
item
about
10.
a year and a half?
No, that packet, we didn't have to do the 45-day review.
Okay,
That particular packet, I was able to submit the 45-day review to OAL
Mhm.
without getting agency approval.
Yeah,
So that one actually took,
a year and a few weeks, right?
yeah, just about a year for that
Okay.
particular
Yeah.
one.
okay. That's what I thought. I was just,
Okay, so then let's just say that there is no issue with this package, and then it goes back to the regulation coordinator, and she notifies the board, or I notify, depends on who gets notice, that there are packages approved for filing. So, like I said, this is what is being added to some of the delay that we're seeing, is this whole review that I'm talking about. That used to, we would file it and the review would happen, as I've mentioned. Now it's pre-filing. They're doing the review.
and is there any way to speed up the process in terms of the year and a half? I know you got your 45 days and then you have all these processes. Is there,
Well, I know
Been
that
doing it for
they're,
18
we're
years.
looking at revising. They told me to tell you this is subject to change, and that they're working on trying to
Right.
shorten the time frames.
right?
So they like, that's why they made me put the date on this chart, because they're like, we just want people to know that we're working on it. And, we used to do this when I first started. We did this process and there were complaints. And so then they rescinded the pre-filing requirement. And from 2008 to 2015, we did it that chart that I showed you that way. And that took about a year. So yes, so that's the 1 year process, that chart I gave you. But adding this on top of that chart has increased the time it has taken to adopt regulations.
So with you having done this for 18 years, do you personally see a way to shorten this whole process?
I can't say at the moment. I'm working on it with my managers to see whether we can shortcut anything, and whether we're doing duplicative review, and whether, I mean, I think we went from having 3 attorneys to reviewing it to like close to 8. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll take a look at it, certainly. And I think that the management really wants to work on seeing if there's a way to shorten
process.
the review time. But right now, this is the process, and sorry.
It's good to know.
And then, so anyway, so your staff would then file the rulemaking, and we get to the final phase, which is where we would be with the chart that I showed you previously. So we file it, the board would receive comments, and I think in this package, the example for the comment that was received is at tab 9. So Kappa's comment was received as part of the rulemaking file, and I believe they testified at the hearing. So the hearing was held, and then a board authorized a 15-day change in response to this comment, because there was an error in the text drafting that was posted. And so that was corrected, and then and you will see the let me see, the modified text notice that goes out is at tab tab 4. So tab 4 is an example of, or 5, I should say, of what would get sent out. So when you make that motion, hi, modify the text, amend it, send it out for further comment, this is what it looks like. There's a notice of availability of modified text. This gets posted on your website along with the text you will see on the next page showing double strikeout or underline where this modification has happened. That way the regulated public and interested parties know what amendment was made in response to the comment. So that's made available 15 days or 45 days, depending on whether the comment is related to the original text or not. If it's not related, because sometimes people think, oh, let's add something, and they're in the middle of a rulemaking, that adds another 45 days to the process. So if you're just changing the text that's been noticed previously, it's usually a 15-day notice. So that was the case here, and that's what was done. So then tab 2 is the final statement of reasons. So you'll see at tabs 6 and 7 that the staff had needed to prepare updated informative digest and a final statement of reasons, which gives OEL an explanation of what happened from start to finish on the rulemaking process. And basically this focuses on what has happened since the text was noticed. And it tells OEL, oh, we had a hearing, we received comments, and here's the board accepted the comment. And then the staff have to reanalyze whether there's an economic and fiscal impact as a result of this change. So again, we're doing that. And so then once that's done, before they file the final package, it goes through the department again, and it goes through agency again. And it goes to the Department of Finance for final sign-off. So you'll see in block 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that is the process we kind of discussed at the beginning. It's just all over again. So we're doing it again. But the difference is that the control agencies get to see what the public thought of the rule proposal. And if there's any flags there for them, they will want to bring it up to your attention and discuss it with your staff. So that may be an opportunity for again, another change. But luckily for us in this package, that didn't happen. And then once agency is the last approver, if they approve it, then the DCA regulations coordinator will notify Ms. Winslow, who handles most of your reg packages, correct? All of them. She will go ahead and prepare the final package, and it basically goes like this in a binder with the table of contents and all the necessary signatures, and it's filed with OEL, and then OEL gets a crack at all those documents we just talked about. So every single document goes through the same 6 standard review for every single document we just talked about. And they have, my understanding, deviated as well. They previously would have one attorney review it. Now they have a committee of 3 review every reg package. So we have quite a challenge to defend the board's policy that it chooses to implement, because at the end of the day, the board is the policymaking body. But really, it's your job, our job, once you've made that decision, to try to advocate for your position, kind of like a legislative proposal. You're going and you're talking to parties and you're trying to convince people this is a good idea and it's not going to have an economic impact. And kind of, Ms. Valencia probably can sympathize with what I'm talking about. But in any event, so, sometimes Office of Administrative Law will call up Ms. Winslow and say, we have a problem with this or that. And then Ms. Winslow will tell me whether she needs my help, and we'll get on a conference call and try to persuade them not to disapprove the package. But, if it happens, all is not lost. I think in 18 years I've been here, I think only 2 packages that have not gone anywhere. Everything else, even if there was a mistake, they give you 120 days to correct it if they disapprove it. If it's really important to you, at the end of the day, it will get done. It just moves slowly. The process moves slowly. So anyway, like I said, if you get an approval, it looks like this. You'll see that it's been filed with the Secretary of State. All regulations are filed with the Secretary of State because they're law, and they keep the official legal copy of all regulations adopted by every state agency. And then you will get an approval like this one on the first page of your packet by the Office of Administrative Law, showing an attorney approving the proposal. So that's your entire package from start to finish with all the work that's involved, and there's quite a bit of it. So if you have any questions, I'm opening the floor to questions. Or if I just completely bored you and you want to take a nap.
This one, which was relatively
Mhm.
took 14 months.
Yes. Now, the director of the Department of Consumer Affairs has authority to, if they have, and you're going to expire, because all rulemakings are supposed to be done within a year under the law once you file it. So that's why it's important about these board meetings that we stay on track once we file the notice, because the clock starts ticking on that 1 year. And if you don't do it before the 1 year, then it expires and OAL will reject the package. So the director has authority to extend the time up to 90 days if it's still in the director's possession. So the director tends to that's part of the job of the regulation coordinator at the department, is to make sure that she keeps track of all the times of all the various packages going through the processes and make sure that we don't expire and before the time frame. And if we have it, the director has it, he can extend for another 90 days your ability to get that rulemaking completed. So we do have that little bit of a window that we get an extra 90 days if the director has the package.
So they added all these layers, but they didn't really give us any more time. Is that right?
Well, I mean, the first layer, the clock hasn't started. The clock starts ticking when you're at this phase, when you start this down here at the bottom, when you file it with OAL down here at 12 on the initial phase. That's when the 1 year starts. So from 12 through this final phase, you have 1 year to finish the rulemaking process. This part is just pre-filing. Yeah, well, not really, but I think the idea was, hey, if we can get the 399, the budget analysis done and signed, you won't have to do it at the back end. So maybe that will turn out to be a benefit in the long run, but we haven't had any finish yet. So I don't know if it will actually cut back on time, because that was kind of the selling point when they rolled out the new process was, well, hey, if you get your 399 signed up front, then you don't have to worry about your 1 year expiring when you actually file. So I was like, okay, well, that might work, but it's hard to know right now. Yes.
You have separate organizations reviewing this.
Mm-hmm.
If one organization has a problem with it, they communicate with you. And what about the other two organizations? Are you to collaborate together so everybody has on same time moving it up? Or is it each one separate?
Well, when it's in the department, they're all reviewing the packages. The legislation and regulatory review, the director, legal, and budgets are all reviewing them separately. So the goal, once again, the lion's share of the work is borne by your staff, and your staff has to keep track of where they are and what they're doing, and making sure that if somebody makes a change, that she changes it throughout the document. Now, I do try to help her to check and make sure that all the changes are incorporated and have been done, because it won't be approved if they all haven't been incorporated. There may be situations where we have a dispute over text that hasn't happened yet, where we've had to bring it back to you, because they can't modify your text. You're the policymaker, so we would always have to bring it back to you for discussion. But we hope to never have to deal with that situation, but it could happen. But like I said, it's difficult, it's challenging, and I think that's part of the reason why there's been additional time, is because people make changes in one division and then it has to be redone and sent back all the way through the process again.
That's why I'm wondering if it'd be one process that have all three divisions looking at it together and collaborating together.
It would be nice, but it's challenging, particularly with, budgets has a lot of priorities besides regulations. They have the fiscal issue that they're dealing with, and so they have to prioritize just like we do. So It's
Thank you.
difficult. Any other questions? Okay, well, now you know how much work is involved and it's considerable, but once you get these through, it's all worth it, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Since we now know all about rulemaking, reg packets, go to item number 11, update and discussion and possible action on regulations. Anita. Christie.
They're all done.
Good afternoon. I have a couple of updates to the summary that is in your packet. 1399.514 renewal of license. Right now, that is in. If you looked at Christie's chart, we're in level 8-9, and I have been contacted by the person at that review and has been asked to do some additional research. So until I get that additional research done and given over to them, it won't get approved.
That won't take the entire year. That we
No,
mentioned
I'm
before.
working
Okay.
on it already. It's just a matter, I just got the information last week. He'll have the information before the end of this week to make
Got
his
it.
decision.
Thank
I
you.
try to get it out as
I just
quickly
didn't
as
know if that
possible.
fell into that same process.
I don't sit on it.
Okay.
I really, unless I can't find the information, I normally turn it around within 1 to 2 business days of getting the request from whoever is requesting the information. Our retirement status has finally been approved by budgets. So it is now on its way back to the legislative division, who in turn will get the director's approval to send it off to agency. So that one is moving right along. 531 and 532, the curriculum requirements and approving the programs. I've gotten those approved by agency. I will be submitting them to the Office of Administrative Law at the end of this month. We are scheduled to have a regulation hearing at our April 23rd meeting. 545, again, you heard earlier today, it was approved by the Med Board, so now I will move forward doing the notice and the initial statement of reasons and get that over to legal for review. 573 has been approved by agency. Again, I'm submitting it at the same time I'm doing 531 and 532, so to kind of consolidate everything, and we'll have a hearing for that on April 23rd as well. And 617, the notice has been done, the 399 is done, the ISR is done, and it's in legal review right now.
Strong work.
Any questions about any of the regulations? That's where we're at. Have a good day.
Thank you, Anita. So April's gonna be an important month.
Yes.
Okay, next item of business, legislative proposal, Business and Professions Code, section 3517. Anita and Christie.
Christy, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this.
Oh, really? Okay.
You want me to get started while you're looking? So this is statute. We have 3517, which for years you guys have had to vote every year on the passing score for your initial examination and also set the dates and times of those scores and locations. Since we don't do our own exam, we thought it would be easier to change the regulation to read that we would approve whatever was set by that national organization, that exam we agreed to accept. Since we have a regulation that specifies what exam we're going to be using, there's no need to specify it in statute. So we're change the statute to read that it would be by a public or private organization specified by the board, which we've already specified in regulation. And we're removing the fact that we have to approve the exam scores and times and places and say that we will accept those scores that have been placed by those organizations that we've already allowed, that we're going to use that exam that they're using.
Okay, so the proposed amendments are on, you'll see the proposed language in the last page in the tab behind item 12. And the first change is, as Anita mentioned, to change it to them conducting the exam, because changing it to conducted makes it clearer that they don't just do it the direction of the board, that you can actually select a public or private organization and they can conduct the exam that you've specified. So there's that clarification. Then there's further amendment to the next paragraph that allows you to select through contract organizations that furnish exam material to conduct an examination. Then the next change is to make it clearer that the board can conduct its own examination if it would like to, and then at that point, you would set the passing score, time, date, and location for each examination. So one of the things that we had talked about a few meetings ago was giving the board more options for different vendors and potentially to do its own examination. So these changes would implement that suggestion by making it clearer that the board can either select any public or private organization that it deems fit to select to conduct its exams. And if you do select someone, then the next paragraph or the next sentence at the end says if the board specifies that organization, then the passing score, time, and place of exam shall be established by that organization. That would get you out of having to vote the time and location and the date of exam every year, which is the way the current law is written. But in addition, the amendments would make it clearer that you can select anyone, and also you can do your own exam if you want. So it gives you clear authority that if you're not happy with any vendor, you can pull out and do your own exam any way you want, by contract or, employing people at the department. So I know that other boards have had similar issues with other national examining organizations, and they just pulled out of the national exam and just said, we're going to do our own because we're not happy with the vendor that's doing it right now. So I think these amendments would help that option be available to the board, and that's kind of why we're bringing it to you. Any questions?
No, I totally agree with this and the amendments. I mean, one of the things is we're voting on the passing score every year. We don't know what the passing score is.
Yeah.
And now the exam is given every single day except Saturday and Sunday up and through December 15th, I think it is, where it used to only be given twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
changed and evolving, and you need something more flexible.
I like the extra flexibility in the second paragraph.
Okay.
Brilliant.
I like it too.
Okay. Any suggested changes to text that you think need to be made? Okay.
I just have one question. I agree
Yes.
with it, but you said other boards have their own examinations,
Yes, they have the authority to conduct their own exam.
and do they, or?
They have, yes. Yes, when they have had falling outs with the national organization, Board of Behavioral Sciences did it, and they pulled out of the market for, I want to say 8 to 10 years. And then the national came back and they negotiated some changes to their exam, and then they allowed people to take the national again. So, I think that it allows you to maintain control over the exam process and to give you more options to consider if there are problems. And I think we talked about it at another board meeting. What if, the national certifying organization currently in existence goes out unexpectedly? What are you going to do? Well, if you don't have authority to do your own exam and hire your own vendor, then you're kind of out of luck. So I think just allowing the flexibility of doing your own, contracting with someone else, or specifying another organization will allow the board the flexibility that you may have had concerns about at the meeting last year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Further discussion? Do I have a motion?
So the motion we're asking you for, let me just be clear, is on the last page. It says the board recommends, the board approve the legislative proposal to be submitted by staff with the omnibus proposal to the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee, or find a sponsor and author for the bill.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Public comment?
Commenting on the regulations that we just talked about
Well-
on testing.
No, this is an actual statutory legislative proposal, 3517. If you see item 12 in the packet.
Okay. So yes, we are, CAPA is in support of having that option.
Okay,
And the illustration that setting timing and that kind of thing, it's just another illustration of the regs that were written in 1976 that just don't make sense anymore. So there's a lot of modernizing we got to do.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? All right, I will call the roll. Charles Alexander,
Aye.
Jennifer Colquist,
Aye.
Sonia Early,
Aye.
Javier Escobar Acosta,
Aye.
Jed Grant,
Aye.
Xavier Martinez,
Aye.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Send a letter to the NCCPA. Okay,
So we did 13 and 14.
yeah. Item number 15, Education Workforce Development Advisory Committee update.
All right. So the accrediting body will meet in the spring, and then there will be some changes. So there really isn't any changes to the numbers from last time. Just as a review, there are 229 accredited programs in the country and 46 developing programs. In California, there are 14 accredited programs. One of those is on probation. 7 have provisional accreditation, which means that they are new programs, and provisional accreditation can last from 3 to 5 years while they're taking classes, and 6 programs that have continuing accreditation. There are 5 developing programs in California, so in the next 3 to 4 years, we could have as many as 19 PA programs in California.
Wow.
So given the increased numbers we've seen in licensure with the provisional programs, and many of the provisional programs have just taken their first few classes, haven't graduated yet. So I would anticipate that we're going to get much busier in the next 3 to 4 years with significant growth in the number of licensees, and also with all of the concordant issues we have with things that come up with licensing and different things like that. So there may be something to look at in terms of staffing, since I know we already have a very hardworking staff. That is, there's the one program on probation in California. I don't have any information about that. That is a well-known program. It's been around for a long time. But I don't anticipate them not being able to rectify that, but I don't have any information on it. Other than that, there are several programs progressing in their accreditation. And after the ARCPA board meeting in March, so by next April, I should have information on number of seats that we're talking about. So I can tell you approximately, or we can tell you approximately how many graduates we can anticipate having when all of these folks come online per year in California.
Because the number of applicants for the PA programs is getting ridiculous.
I can
mean,
tell you, yeah.
900 applicants for 25 seats.
Well, at the program where I work, I'm the admissions director at our program. Right now, we have 2,700 applicants this year for 45 seats. So it's sort of in demand. So it's very competitive.
It's a good problem to have.
Yes, it is.
For the Stanford program, I believe this they got more than 2,000 applicants for 25 seats. Now that they just modified the whole program, now they add the new master of medical science with the Stanford program. So I think because they're getting a better program, that's why the applicants just went from 400 to more than 2,000 applicants.
And I suspect the next problem for the programs will be preceptors.
Well, in order to, that's part of the accreditation process. So in order to be accredited, they have to have adequate clinical training sites for the number of students that they are taking before the first student enrolls in the program. So they can't really get accredited, and sometimes that will delay their accreditation and delay the start of the first class until they can get all of those sites lined up. So significant amount of work goes into them being able to, when you look at these developing programs, they've been working on this for several years already before the first student is enrolled.
Okay, anything else?
Anything to add, Charles?
Public comment? All right, we will move on to our favorite discussion item, number 17, development since February 2000. Oh, yes. Before that favorite item, item 16, discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to initial physician assistant license application, application instructions, and applicant general information documents. Anita. This we talked about some at the last meeting.
You've all had a chance to review the changes that I've made to the application and the instructions. Before you make the motion to accept them, I have a couple of changes within the instruction pages after speaking with legal counsel. So on the general instructions, page 4, under military expedite, under letter B, where it says certificate of release or discharge from active duty, I want to add in parentheses DD 214. So some of them know it by the name and some of them know it by the form number. So we wanted to make sure that they had both options if everybody's okay with me adding the DD 214 at the end of that sentence. And then in the same packet on page number 7, under canceled physician assistant license. Did I go too fast?
I'm sorry, the pages are not numbered on the electronic version, so I'm having trouble following you.
I apologize for that. I thought they were.
If you can give like a PA, you know, they have the big block number, PA1,
We're looking
PA2.
at the instructions, not the actual application.
Do we have those in the electronic form?
You should, it should have been one whole packet.
That PA1?
No, it's,
No, I'm talking about the form.
Oh, it's further down. You got to scroll all the way through. Okay, I found it. Okay, sorry, I
No, they
found.
don't have it going. That's not what she's talking about.
the
Yes.
application instructions.
There you
at
go.
the bottom of
They're
those pages.
probably
That's what you're looking at.
scroll down 15 to 18 pages.
Because I summarized the changes and then put it behind it so that you wouldn't have to. I was trying to make it easier, I guess I did. But did you find the page 4?
Yes.
A military expedite, and everybody's okay with just adding the DD 214?
Mhm.
If you could scroll down 3 more pages to page 7 of that same packet. The section it's the first page of general information. It's the second section called canceled physician assistant license. Is everybody there? Okay. The last paragraph after speaking, we're going to kind of put back what was originally there. So where I had where I had expired for 5 years and a day, we're going to take the and a day out and just leave in more than 5 years. So that's the change I'd like to make from what you have originally seen. So the sentence will read, a California physician assistant license that has been expired for more than 5 years will automatically be canceled. So, Christie, we need 2 motions, right? One to approve the application and one to approve the instructions.
Well, if they don't have any changes, they could do all three, an application, instructions, and general information documents.
Right, but don't we have to incorporate these 2 changes?
Well, I think, they could make a motion to approve the changes as proposed by staff. And that would
Okay.
include anything that you
Okay,
just orally provided to them.
all right, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Or does anybody have any questions about the changes that have been incorporated?
What was just proposed by staff?
Do we have a second?
Second.
What was the motion again? I missed
To
it, I'm sorry.
approve the changes proposed by staff,
Is that the ones Anita just read, or all of the ones listed in the
all
document
the
here?
ones listed in the packet, unless you guys have amendments to anything.
I'm just trying to catch up.
Okay.
Further discussion? All
I
right,
think Jed still needs to.
Yeah,
address a
it's,
little bit.
it's fine. I'm in the ballpark. It's fine.
How long will that take? How long will it take to update this and have it on the system?
About a week
Okay.
or less. I have to get my regulation thing first done. It takes about a day to get it posted right on the website.
High priority, they asked for minimum of 4 to 10 days.
I'm sorry, Julie does that now, so.
We were notified by the agency that does all of our internet changes that they were getting a lot of requests, high priority, and so they've sent me out a new list to follow. So I would say these are a priority, but they're not considered high, so it's not something you're going to turn around in that 3-day window or 24 hours. They have a 24, they have a 3-day, and then they have like a 4 to 10 day. So there's different categories. So I have to really look at what that falls into. So I would say after we do them, then they'll probably be up within 7 to 10 business days.
Okay.
But Breeze will take longer. So
Yes.
we have the online changes that'll need to be done. So those are done less frequently. So they'll have to be waiting for a new release. So
And these changes in Breeze for our online application, probably we won't see for 9 months.
Wow.
Yes, because the release for June has already been slotted. And they do them every 6 to 9 weeks. So I'm looking at the end of the summer because everything that's supposed to go out in June has already been slotted. And I have some things there that are being done for us, but
Meaning that they only take a certain amount of information to be,
they can only
Sent out.
input a certain amount in each change.
Mhm.
So you have to prioritize. Because this will be a legal issue,
right,
I'll be able to get it into the next one,
which is September, or do they go on every?
August.
Okay. Every so many months. Okay.
And so that brings up the point of, is this going to cause an issue with having an application in a written format that is different from an online application?
Well, I was thinking, can't we
So-
roll it out at the same time?
Them out at the same
Same time.
time. You can't have
So
different
going back to your
applications.
question about the Breeze, I wouldn't imagine
9
this will be
months.
implemented until we get
Exactly.
thumbs up from Breeze.
Okay. Right, and that was what I was wondering, since we have a paper form and then we
It's the
also have a
same thing
Breeze.
that we were up against when we started doing the online application. That first time we did the change, we actually didn't roll out the paper change of the application until the online was completed.
because it's not fair to the applicants.
Right.
And it's not fair to staff to always have to say, you need to refer to the paper applications and
Right.
instructions, because if we're changing the questions too, we need to be consistent. So.
Makes sense. Okay.
So I have a question. Since we haven't really changed the body of the questions of the application, we're just asking for additional information. The only question we really did change in the whole application was question number 20. I mean, it's question number 17, where we added in the word "been disciplined by," because that was, if the student was disciplined by their program, they were saying no to that question because it didn't say that. So that's really the only question that we actually changed the verbiage in. So would that, they still have to roll out at the same time?
No, they have to roll out at the same time. You can't have applicants being treated inconsistently. And certainly the way that instructions are written can change interpretations and answers to questions, and that would mean that people are being treated differently. So I would not recommend rolling it out until both applications are being posted and made available at the same time.
Okay,
And I think in terms of public protection, the form that goes out to the program director for the applicants addresses the same issue. So,
yeah, and that was the other thing we didn't, is approval of the two forms, the PA6 and the PA7. I've changed the questions on those, did we?
That's part of the application.
That's
right?
part of the application?
So,
Okay.
all of that.
is that the
The application.
Yeah, that's at the very end of your packet,
end of the whole thing or this section?
the end of, well, after the
section-
initial instructions, then you should see changes to page PA6, which is the training program certification. I've actually changed the questions on those.
Yeah, that's all considered part of the application.
Yeah, I just didn't know if he got a chance to look at the questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a painful finger from all this scrolling here.
Sorry.
Okay. And that's all part of this same motion. We're accepting all the
Yes.
changes to this as well.
And on the
That's part of the
verification of
application.
licensure from other licenses being held by people, since we can't get, asking if they have a complaint against them or a pending legal action, they can't ever answer those questions, so we decided to take them out of that particular form and just ask if they've ever had any disciplinary action against their license.
Okay.
So those are the major changes on those.
Thank you. And all of these will happen at the same time.
Yes.
Yes.
Further discussion? Okay, I want to call the roll. Public comment first.
Did you ask for public comment? Public comment.
Public comment? Seeing none. Dr. Alexander?
Aye.
Jennifer Calquist?
Aye.
Sonia Early?
Aye.
Javier Escobar Acosta?
Aye.
Jed Grant?
Aye.
Xavier Martinez?
Aye.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Great.
Okay. Now to item number 17. Development since February 2015 United States Supreme Court decision in North Carolina State Board of Dental Examiners versus Federal Trade Commission. Christie.
As you know, in February 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling which held that state licensing boards controlled by market participants, meaning licensees, active in the market being regulated by those boards are not immune from federal antitrust laws and liability unless they are, 1, acting pursuant to clearly articulated state policy to displace competition with regulation, and 2, are subject to active state supervision by a non-market participant. This marked a change in prior legal precedent where boards had been shielded from antitrust litigation altogether. Since that time, a number of lawsuits have been filed across the country challenging boards and regulators on everything from rules requiring background checks for taxi app service drivers to disciplinary actions over dog medication dosing and arguing that such rules or board actions restrain competition. Most of the cases that I've reviewed in the past year or two have dealt with this issue, have been settled, but there are a couple worth mentioning. The first one is Teladoc versus Texas Medical Board. In April 2015, Teladoc challenged a rule by the Texas Medical Board requiring people to see a doctor in person before being treated remotely. The company alleged the Texas Medical Board instituted the rule with the goal of thwarting competition from remote medical providers. 12 of the 14 members of the board are active physicians, and the only member to dissent from the rule was one of the public members. The case ended up settling after the board lost a motion to dismiss the case on immunity grounds. A legislative solution was crafted and enacted by the state Texas legislature, which included removal of the in-person examination requirement. What's notable about this case, aside from the fact that the court didn't agree with the board's immunity arguments at the prejudgment level, was that the Federal Trade Commission and the U.S. Department of Justice weighed in on the case, filing a joint amicus brief siding with Teladoc. So I thought that was quite an interesting case where what ended up happening is when there's a dispute about how to regulate in an area is you send it through the legislative process to resolve, to avoid the antitrust issues. The second case is Robb versus the Connecticut Board of Veterinary Medicine. Veterinarian John Robb sued Connecticut's Veterinary Board in June, challenging its decision to discipline him over his vaccination procedures. The Veterinary Medical Board moved to dismiss the case, arguing, among other things, that because it had not made a decision in the case, the court didn't have jurisdiction. The board further argued that it and its members are protected by state action immunity. What is notable about the case is that the court dismissed the case against the board, finding that dismissal was warranted not on state action immunity arguments, but because the plaintiff did not plead or prove that there was an agreement or conspiracy among the board members to restrain trade. In particular, the court judge explained that the U.S. Supreme Court case was about that board run by private actors in the marketplace taking action outside of the procedures mandated by state law to expel a competitor from the market. So if you recall in the North Carolina Dental Board case, there were no rules or statutes authorizing the conduct that occurred. And so the board members actually directed their staff to issue cease and desist letters, and they had no power to issue those letters. And it was to prevent people from giving teeth whitening at local malls because they claimed that it was the practice of dentistry to teeth whiten. So the court kind of focused on the fact that because when you're sitting in as a judge in a disciplinary case, you're simply doing your job. It's not an agreement to restrain trade. And so he found that the veterinarian had not properly alleged any conduct of individual board members other than sitting in adjudication of an administrative proceeding brought by another state agency, an action the board members were required to take under state law. So this is the only case I've found that's actually made it to a decision point where there's actually an analysis by a judge of a fact in a case relating to antitrust in a board. And this decision is kind of in line with the California Attorney General's office's opinion on antitrust liability for board members. The Attorney General actually indicated in her opinion that she didn't believe that you could be subjected potentially to antitrust arguments in the context of deciding a disciplinary matter. And so this decision kind of further supports that kind of a legal argument. Now, we haven't had, like I said, a lot of cases so far, but I thought these two were interesting, and I thought I'd bring them to your attention sort of to see how things are playing out in courts across the country. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, next item. Number 20, report of legislative committee discussion and possible action. Valencia and Early. Mary,
Hello.
Sonia.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off here. Just wanted to say welcome back, everyone, and Happy New Year. Great to see everybody. Based on a review by our ledge unit as well as Lynn and Christy, we currently have no active bills that we really need to track right now. But of course, that could all change at a minute's notice, so you never know. However, there was one bill that Christy recommended that we bring up for discussion, and it was a bill that passed last year, which is now obviously not a bill but law. It was Senate Bill 554, and Sonia and I wanted to just briefly bring that up. The bill, which was signed into law last September, establishes the, buprenorphine prescribing, I don't know if I said that right, buprenorphine? Prescribing privileges of the Federal Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act of 2016 and the Nurse Practitioner and Physician Assistant Practice Act. So I guess what it's doing is allowing nurse practitioners and physician assistants to have the ability to be able to prescribe this medication. That's part of the Addiction Recovery Act is on the list. So we wanted to raise the fact that this is something that's been passed, an amendment to PA scope of work, and wanted to bring it to this board's attention and see how if we could possibly get that information out, disseminated to licensees.
So is there a way that we can effectively get that information out to the physician assistant community via the board's website, or what other options do we have in terms of?
We can post it on our website, as well as we have an interested parties list. We can do a mass blast to them.
Okay.
If you would like, would you want a letter maybe sent to?
I think that's good for now. Maybe we can enlist the help of Kappa, which does a great job in notifying our PA community and future updates. I know that Kappa sends out information so often. Maybe in one of the future updates, we can make it aware to the PA community about SB 554. Would that be possible? Okay, great. All right. Then. Oh, yes.
Is this going to need any kind of a regulation?
No.
Okay.
I just have to say, I wish that Kappa members, all licensees were Kappa members, but that's not the case. So there's a bunch of licensees who might want to know it that aren't Kappa members, but certainly to our membership, we do keep them informed.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that brings up a good point. So there might be a population of PAs that may not be aware of this. So with Kappa and the board, do we think that that might be a great cross intersection with, or is there another?
Believe it or not, we have licensees that don't even know our website. Have never
Right.
looked at it. So
Right.
I think I just heard somebody say maybe send something to the schools, a letter. Okay.
Okay.
I just want to add that it's important that if you're going to make that announcement, that it's clear that according to this, they have to take a 24-hour class before they can prescribe. So this doesn't mean they can just go out and
Right.
prescribe buprenorphine.
And I think they have to like submit for, for a waiver or something. I don't know the specifics, but we can get all that. Maybe Gay already knows.
Gay.
Yeah.
We'll be sure to track the statutory requirements for waiving the prior approval of the supervising physician, which is what that course requirement does.
Yeah, I did warn Lynn that you have to take the class. Your supervising physician also has to have the waiver. So beware if then your phone starts ringing, and then everybody answering the phone has to be aware, because there's a lot of ifs. A very small population of PAs are going to do this in the first place. Very small. So just be aware that there's lots of hoops after you get the word out.
Quick question. Okay. Do you guys already have like a breakdown, like bullet points of what this did, this legislation?
Well, we did the Suboxone nationally in federal law. Suboxone, that was what was
okay.
approved, and then now this just does something for the state. So
State,
yeah,
yeah.
we've got a link to where you can go take the 24 hours.
Oh,
where you
okay.
can get the waiver.
Maybe we can add that to our, whatever we're posting. That'll be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, item number 21, agenda items for the next meeting. We talked about Maximus.
Strategic plan.
Strategic plan.
Strategic plan, 15 minutes. Gotta keep you jovial. Everybody thinks the meeting's over. We still have a closed session that's
I know.
got 6 cases in it. Anita?
No.
I'd like to possibly put discussion to, we have military expedite or waivers for, renewals. And we have no form, we have no justification for our military people who are sent away to waive their renewal fees. So can we have a future discussion on how we want to handle that?
Yes. Let's put it on the next agenda.
Is the OTP update still gonna be on there, or do we have to add that?
I think we should keep it on every agenda.
Okay, I
Just-
agree, I just wanted to make sure it was gonna be.
Yeah. And same with North Carolina. And hopefully financial information on what our real numbers are.
So you want a budget update?
Yes, an accurate one.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Is there a way we can get an update on a replacement from the medical board?
Well, that's really not, I mean, we can discuss it, but that's a governor appointee.
Is there any way we can inquire through?
As part of the EO update, part of your report.
Yeah.
you can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can do it on my end.
I would think personally, if I was on the medical board, going to their 4 to 6 meetings, and then getting an invite to become a member of the PA board and not be a voting member and get to sit here for 8 hours at a time, I think I would decline.
That's why I asked the question. Is there a reason? Well, I'm sure there's people
I
that
mean-
don't want to because of that very reason, but.
We argued that out ad nauseum at the last sunset hearing, and I thought Senator Green was actually going to swing the other way, and then somehow pressure came from somewhere. And
So
didn't.
that'll be on your next agenda.
Yes. All right, do we want a 10-minute break before we start
Yes.
closed session?
Yes.
Sigh.